Well, here we are, folks, enjoying a lovely sunny spring day. Oh, it's that time already. Here we go. Hello, and welcome to this new element that I'm adding to the channel. I'm calling it Vintage Time. I've been planning to do this for some time. I am primarily a vintage watch fan, collector, as it were. So I've been really meaning to do some segments and installments based on different kinds of vintage watches and their history and what makes them so cool and interesting. So I thought I would start with this. Just actually won this watch very recently on an Instagram raffle. A very fantastic gentleman by the name of Retro Watch Guy was doing the giveaway. He has a website and deals in vintage watches, and they are all quite fantastic. They're usually in the kind of affordable range, which is great. So do check out Retro Watch Guy, and I'll make sure to include his information down below. But let's, without further ado, get right into this installment. And this installment is the Bulova wrist alarm. I don't know the exact date of this, the date of this watch, when this watch was made. I believe this is from the early to mid 50s. But I have not really dug into that. The wrist alarms were produced into the 60s by Bulova. So let's first of all, before we get into this particular watch, just go over just a bit of history. I read a great blog post recently talking about how wrist alarms or alarm watches is really, for mechanical watches, one of the most useful complications. That's something you could genuinely find yourself using on a daily basis, as compared to, say, a chronograph or a minute repeater or a moon phase or any number of those other kinds of complications. An alarm watch is a interesting complication, requires some ingenuity to accomplish, and is something that is very useful, that you could use it to wake up every morning or remind yourself when to take your pills or who knows what. And yet they have really quite fallen out of favor. Most people have an alarm on their cell phones and or on their G-Shock, which you can set to beep. But really, mechanical wrist alarms are really not a common thing. I think there are probably some very, very high-end watches that you can get them on, but not not nearly as ubiquitous as your chronographs, etc. Bit of history. So the first alarm wristwatch, now not watch, so not pocket watch, because there are alarm pocket watches that date back, I think, to the 1700s. Although the first truly mass-produced patent came in the late 1800s, around 1890 or something like that. But the first alarm wristwatch was produced by Eterna, a very, very respectable brand. Eterna, they were essentially the where ETA or ETA, where ETA, the movement house, started. And the Eterna alarm wristwatch came out in 1914. And there were some developments over time, various different kinds of alarm watches, but really the big revolution in alarm wristwatches came in the 40s, specifically 1947, when Volcane released the Cricket. Now, what was so darn cool about the Cricket? Well, the Cricket, and you will see how how this alarm works, and it's very similar in many ways. But just like this one, the Cricket had a oscillating hammer, a little hammer that bounced back and forth. And the cool thing that the Cricket did is that it had a thin metal membrane within the case back. And when the hammer of the alarm hit a post connecting to that membrane, the membrane really rang out like a drum. This made the Cricket very loud and very popular. Another brand that was very well known for their alarm watches was J. Lecoute. They, of course, had the Memovox, which is also a very popular alarm watch. Bulova started making the wrist alarm watch in 1953 and continued in production and popularity well into the 60s. So you can actually find these. One in good condition will run you, I think, around $500. So it's kind of in that range of affordability. A bit of basic dimensions on this. The case measures 34 millimeters across without the crowns. That seems smaller than how it feels. This watch definitely wears larger. It does have a 41 lug to lug length and is pretty chunky. I didn't measure the height, but you can see it's a pretty chunky watch and thus really has a good solid feel on the wrist. Obviously, it's all stainless steel construction. You can see on the case back, the serial number there reads 94781 and M9. I do not know what those stand for, if they coincide with a year or anything of the sort. All right. Before we go into actually the back and I show off some of the workings of the movement, let's actually take a look at how this alarm works. So first thing you do is you wind the watch. Now I actually have this all the way wound right now. The crown winds. There's one barrel, so this does not have two barrels like the Volcane Cricket has. So that means that the main spring will power both the alarm and the actual main watch movement. I don't know for sure how they do it to where ultimately the alarm stops stops at some point and stops winding down the rest of the movement, but that is my understanding of how this works. So you wind this up and then you set the alarm hand. It will only rotate in one direction. If I move it this way, nothing will happen. So it'll rotate and you set it to, let's say, wherever you want it to ring. We're going to set it to 8 o'clock. When you want to activate the alarm, you're going to pull out the crown at 4 o'clock. Now, when I have it pulled out, when the alarm is activated, I can't move the hand and also can't wind the watch. So let us actually move this right over to where our hand is right now, so we can actually hear it go. There, that click indicated that we're activated. So now we're just going to go ahead and pull this out. And there it goes. That's a good long ring. That rang for a good 15 seconds, I think. Yeah. So so there it is. So now that we've pushed the crown back in, we can move the alarm hand again, and then we can wind the watch up again so that the alarm is ready to go next time. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and flip her over and open up the back so you guys can take a closer look at this thing in action. Okay, now I have loosened up the back here with my case opening tool. So we're going to go ahead and finish that up right here. You will see these kind of case back mechanisms often on Vostok watches, the Vostok, the Russian dive watches. These actually work quite well for water resistance because what happens is this obviously holds the case back down, and then as increased water pressure, as water pressure increases, it actually applies pressure onto the case back and onto the case back gasket, allowing it to almost essentially increase water resistance. In this case, however, the reason that this needed to be two separate pieces is because this case back cannot rotate. And I'm about to show you why. Now, a quick look at the 11 AERC movement, and then let's have a look at this case back. As you see, the case back has this post right here. Oh, there we go. And this post has to go into one specific position within this movement. I will show you right now. It is right here, okay? Because this is the hammer for the alarm. Now, when this alarm goes off, what happens is it hits this outer ring, which comes out when you want to remove the movement, and this outer ring is largely responsible for the ringing sound, and that on this side, and on the flip side, it hits against this post. What that contributes to is a lot of the vibration that you end up feeling on your wrist when the alarm is ringing. And now let's take a closer peek at the movement itself, and of course, see it in action. All right, so there it is, the Bulova wrist alarm. Definitely a very cool watch, and one I was very happy to win. Definitely never expected I would, but here it is. I really enjoy it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this little presentation. Yeah, cheers. Elk Run, Evansdale on Osage Road is one video coming in.
Why are you still here? Perhaps the movie's over. Bye. Some funnel clouds, or maybe that tornado briefly touching the ground. And we certainly appreciate